Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Brian Thomas, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I cannot thank you enough for making time out of your schedule for us, and I'm super excited about our time together. So like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today, and then we're going to talk about this amazing book that you have that's going to be available on March 12th. Is that cool?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, first, let me thank you for having me. I've been listening to your podcast for a while, and I listened to it on my commute. So unfortunately, I cannot take notes.
Yeah.
But I mean, just listening to you and talking about your children and getting techniques on parenting and listening to, is it James Darnborough? Am I saying his name right? I mean, and the life that he's lived in his book. I mean, right?
Yeah.
I mean, being in South Africa during that, the Rugby World Cup and, living in London and now in LA. So
James is the man.
Yeah. Yeah. So I am grateful to be here. I'm humbled to be here with, the great work that you're doing.
Thank you, bud. His wife reached out to me and thanked me for the interview.
Well, that was an excellent interview. It was
doesn't happen every
one of
day,
my favorites. So yeah,
it really touched me. It really did. So super good guy, one of my favorite people. So tell us a little bit about where you were born.
Excellent. Okay. So I was born in, Chicago, Illinois.
Okay.
And that's where I am sitting right now. I'm still in Chicago. So
you grew up in Chicago?
I grew up in its suburbs. Yeah. I grew up in the western suburbs in Elmurst, Illinois. Another fact, or one of your other podcast guests, I believe it was Alexis Los.
Yeah.
I may be saying her last name incorrectly, but
You're saying it right. You're saying it right.
She went to York High School, except in Virginia.
Yeah.
I went to York High School in Elmhurst, Illinois. So
wow, what a small world.
But I grew up in Elmhurst, Illinois, which is about 16 miles west of Chicago.
Yeah.
And and even in my book, I talk about the upbringing that I had in Elmhurst because, thinking about your podcast and thinking about our conversation today, it really caused me to go back in time to, being a kid in Elmhurst and what lessons did I learn? Yeah. Because my parents grew up a little bit east of Elmhurst in Cook County, and it was a very hardworking area that they grew up in, but college really wasn't something that they were going to do, right? They were really, I don't want to say struggling to get by, but when you're just trying to make rent, getting the money to go to college in the 60s really wasn't an option for them.
Yeah. When you're trying to survive, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they made the decision in roughly the late 70s to move to Elmhurst, Illinois. And I wouldn't be here today with you if it wasn't for that decision.
Yeah.
So, my parents moved there for the school district, a great school district, one of the best school districts in Illinois. And, they bought probably the crappiest home in Elmhurst to do that. And,
bless their heart.
Yeah, exactly. And both of my parents worked full time and they worked hard.
Mm-hmm.
They worked at Illinois Bell, which, was AT&T, and then Ma Bell was, broken up into Baby Bells, and they worked for Illinois Bell. And my father was a lineman. So, he used to get up on telephone poles back when there were telephone poles and work on the lines. And, I still remember one of the first times I went to the emergency room is because I was dancing to, American Bandstand or Soul Train, or, whatever it was back then. And I tripped and fell and I hit this piece of furniture that we used for our television, and I hit my lip. The piece of furniture, though, was like a big wooden spool, right? That used to carry, the
Cable.
telephone
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
Telephone.
Yeah. I remember those. Yeah, those things were
Exactly.
huge.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's
So he made a piece of furniture out of it?
he basically would steal. I don't know whether he stole them. I don't know if they were garbage. I don't know.
We're getting your dad in trouble.
Yeah, I think the statute of limitations is up on it, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, we would use these big spools as furniture in our home. So, I never thought that we were poor, but we certainly didn't have extra money lying around, right? And my parents just worked hard, and again, today the house that we bought in Elmhurst would probably have been condemned in the 70s. It was like, good luck. So, and we had this one car garage in the back that they, finally saved enough money to, get a real garage back there. But to save a little bit of extra money, my father got a dumpster and a sledgehammer and took a Saturday and took that sledgehammer to the old garage and took it down with his own two hands.
Yeah.
And, that's what I saw over and over and over growing up.
Yeah.
So, just, the value of hard work and, just the value of hard, consistent work and reaping benefits. Because I'll tell you, it wasn't hard scrabble my entire existence in Elmhurst. I mean, we bought maybe the crappiest house on the block, and they beautified it. They built it up. It was gorgeous. They sold it and, bought another home in Elmhurst. And I just got to see, I was very fortunate to see this, that hard work, consistent hard work, you were able to kind of climb that socioeconomic ladder.
Yeah.
Right. And, the vacations started to change. We actually got on a plane, to go to places rather than get in the car and going to St. Louis.
Yeah.
So, and again, without these decisions that they made at a young age, I know I wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was important for you to see, right? Because you saw the ramifications of what hard work and doing the right thing and doing it the right way can do.
Yeah.
That's a big deal because it shows you literally figured it right by action, shows you what can be done.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was in what they did talk about, they always said, okay, education, education, education.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But, it's always like, don't do what I say, do what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or don't do what I do what I say.
Right.
And, what I saw them doing is working hard.
Yeah.
Right. Which now when I get up and the house is quiet and go to work and then I come home and it's dark out, that's what I'm doing now because that's what I saw, 40 years ago. So, but the other big deal about where I grew up was, the education component.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I went to York High School in Elmhurst, a wonderful place, a wonderful school. I had some excellent teachers, and I was really well prepared to move on to college, which, at least for me, wasn't really an option.
Yeah.
It wasn't, and I was very fortunate. My parents said, we moved here so that you would have this opportunity to go to college, and you are 100% going to take it.
Yeah.
And the administrators and the teachers at York, they were all excellent in terms of preparing us for college. And then once I got there, I mean, there were not many concepts that I saw in college that I hadn't seen already in high school, which was awesome. Just gives you a head start when you're sitting.
Absolutely. And it helps with your confidence too, because here you are, a fish out of water, right? And you're trying to get used to living away from home. And I mean, it's right. And when you're prepared correctly and you go into college, all of a sudden it's like, okay, here's something I know. Here's something I can hang my hat on. Here's something, right? So that's also a big deal too when you're trying to evolve into being a student and living away from home. So let me ask you this. Growing up, what was your favorite thing about growing up in that community?
The people. It was, our first house, 1019 Sailor. We had a block where certainly not every house, but every other house had a child in it.
Yeah.
So it was one of those blocks you left out of your back door. I would go over to David Bosman's house across the street, enter his house through the back door.
Yeah.
I didn't knock, I didn't call. I just walk in.
Yeah.
Right. And if David was getting yelled at, I would excuse myself and I'd leave, and he'd come out and get me whenever he was available.
Right. And he'd call you a weenie and all that, right? I got it. So,
Yeah.
so it was the sense of community, right? And it
Yeah.
was a way of growing up that's a lot different than today, where you go out and you play all day, all night, or all day until it's nighttime and it's time to come in for dinner, right?
Yep. Yeah. And then you got to go back out in the summer, and you
Yeah.
came back in when the street lights came on, and
Yep.
maybe you could play in the yard after the street lights came on, depending on the night. So, it was having all of these kids who, just got along and played well together, who were all about the same age and all kind of growing up together,
Yeah.
like on the sandlots in Elmhurst. It was really, really a great time.
So who was the most influential person to you growing up?
It's a great question. I mean, obviously, probably my parents,
Yeah.
right? Because they still influence who I am today.
Yeah, I can tell.
So it's their hard work, that work ethic that they didn't, I mean, they instilled it in me, but only because that's what they were doing.
Well, they showed you,
Yeah.
right? That's the best part of leadership. And let's be honest, parenting is sacred leadership. You've heard it on this podcast before, right?
Yeah.
You show your children work ethic by doing it. You don't talk about it, you do it.
Yeah.
And they see you lead by example. And it's a big, big deal. It's a big deal. So bigger than most people realize. So in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
I had, well, certainly history / social studies
Yeah.
was my favorite. Joan Davis was, I mean, I basically followed her around the school, and many of us did. I remember this lessons that she taught me early, or taught the class early. It was on the Tet Offensive in
Yeah.
Vietnam. And she gave us 3 different periodicals. One was conservative, one was moderate, another one was liberal.
Right.
All right. And we read 3 different stories about the Tet Offensive, and they were like 3 different stories about 3 different things.
Yeah.
There was very little intersection.
Okay.
And she looked at us afterwards when we were all discussing it and debating it and saying there's just, there's very little commonality.
Right.
And the lesson was read everything.
Yeah.
And come to your own conclusions.
Yeah.
Right.
Think
Just
critically.
yeah.
Right. That's a big part of law school too, by the way. Think
Yeah.
critically. That's a big deal. And that's something really important to learn when you're in high school.
Yeah. So I was very, very, I was blessed to have those sorts of teachers. So she's one that I followed around. Another one of my favorite classes was English. I had Mr. Bill Cloud, who really taught me the craft of how to write. Right. And he was like, and this was probably when Dead Poets Society had just come out, and we all jumped on our desks and tried to look at the classroom from a different point of view and perspective, and but him saddling up next to me, looking at my writing and giving me authority as a writer, is something that I remember and appreciate 30 years later.
Yeah, and in law, you use that a lot.
It's fun though. It's fun because the older I've gotten, I'm now practicing. I think I'm in my 25th year.
Yeah.
Which in and of itself is amazing, because it's like a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
But now I have more fun when I write briefs, as opposed to it being more mechanical.
Yeah.
So I'm able, I have the confidence, because I've been doing it for so long, that I'm able to have some fun in a brief.
Yeah, it also helps when you want to write a book too.
Yeah, that's true too. But I've really enjoyed English, really enjoyed history. And then I just had I wasn't a math guy,
Yeah.
but like Mr. Portencaso, I loved him and he loved math. And so even some of the classes that I didn't really enjoy, I had great teachers.
Yeah.
And it was a pleasure and a joy, getting to sit and hang out with them for an hour.
Well, the best thing about good teachers, and even great teachers, right, is it makes you more excited about education. It makes education more fun, and it makes it something that you want to continue to discover, that you want to continue to venture into. Man, when it's the opposite, it's really rough, you know. So it's really a cool thing that you had what you had growing up. So in high school, did you play any sports?
No, I say I couldn't, and now I question that. I'm a kidney transplant patient.
Okay.
So that's kind of like the third pillar of my upbringing was, I always knew that I was going to need a kidney transplant. I had one when I was 13.
Okay.
And because of that, my mom in particular was very protective for great reason.
Oh, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Of the kidney.
Yeah.
Right. I
mean, you gotta do what you gotta do, right?
Yeah.
And, playing in sports has some risk to it physically. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I
careful.
No, but I wanted to play.
Yeah.
So I surreptitiously went out for the wrestling team. I figured I could stay under the radar on wrestling. My freshman year, I was tiny. I was probably 92 pounds. And Mrs. Sullivan saw my mom at the grocery store and said what a great job I had been doing on the wrestling team. And let me tell you, who wasn't wrestling the next day.
Got rid of that deal fast. See, that's that community, right? News travels fast, little like greased lightning.
Yeah. So that didn't last terribly long, but at the same time, I had to take care of the kidney, and everything that my mom was doing was appropriate. So
Absolutely.
I didn't have that opportunity. But in writing the book, it's one of the first things that I talk about, and not necessarily the kidney transplant, but the story that I told myself because of these transplants that, again, unintentionally, there were all these good reasons behind it. But, I questioned I don't want to say I questioned it, but I always called myself fragile.
Yeah.
Right. Because I needed to be careful of the kidney and I couldn't do this or I couldn't do that. And, so I wondered if I was living my life that way too.
Yeah.
Or would I've gone for different things if I didn't have this story that I told myself in the back of my head unconsciously.
Isn't that fascinating? Because now that you've written the book, you had to go back and look at that again. And it's like you're looking back at it going, okay, well, maybe you're right. Maybe I was this. Maybe it's an amazing process. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So you go to college. Where do you go to college?
I went to University of Illinois.
Okay. Why
down
there?
in Champaign-Urbana. Why there? I think it was easy. No, and when I say easy, I mean like easy for my parents. It was affordable.
Yeah.
It was where I kind of belonged to go, to be quite honest. Like that's where my brain, like it's a good school, and my peers who were, my level were going down there. I could have probably gone somewhere else, but even though my parents, did by that time earn a decent amount of money, but they didn't have enough to like send me off to Stanford. All right. So staying in state and getting a good education down at University of Illinois made the most sense at the time. And I enjoyed my 4 years down there. I had a great time down there.
So at University of Illinois, what did you major in?
Political science and economics.
Okay.
So I went in as a poli-sci major. I figured that would be one way to keep me out of a math room. And I knew I wanted to go to law school. Right. I loved politics and loved history. So and the positive was I didn't have to take another math class. And then
I love history too.
Yeah. And then I took Econ 101. And then I loved economics, and then lo and behold, I found myself in math classes again because I loved it. And that was to actually leave with that as a double major. I needed to take math too. So
it's different when math involves something you love, right?
Yeah.
Different context altogether. I hear you are trying to avoid it,
Yeah. And then I end up in the class again. So
right. So you decide to go to law school. What makes you decide to go to law school? What was it that compelled you? Because it's not something people do every day. And there's usually a reason behind it. Is there anything in particular that compelled you to go to law school?
100% my parents.
Okay.
And so I say that like jokingly, but there's also a lot of truth behind it.
Right.
I was kind of a smart aleck growing up, and my mom always said, you have an answer for everything.
Yeah. I find that hard to imagine.
Yeah. But in doing that, she said, you should go to law school. You're going to be a lawyer. You're going to be a lawyer. And then you kept hearing that over and over and over. And, it creates this little rut in your brain.
Yeah.
And then, they literally, I remember graduating my senior year in college. I was out probably having a little bit of fun, and my roommate is like, "You need to listen to not voicemail, answering machine."
Yeah.
And it was, someone from Stanley Kaplan, because my parents had signed me up for the LSAT prep.
Oh my gosh.
So, I had to be there at 8 a.m. the next day.
Right.
So that's the story of me getting, taking the LSAT prep, and then taking the LSAT was also them. And then they literally drove me down to college to DePaul University College of Law to register and things like that. I mean, they almost physically put me in that chair. Now,
I love this.
Again, I'm thrilled that they did.
So college wasn't an option. Sounds like law school wasn't an option, right? You're just going. That's all there is to it.
No,
I love your parents. I love your parents, man.
That's what they did. College was not an option, and neither was law school. So
that's awesome.
So yeah, I'm grateful for them. I'm grateful for all the, pushing and needling that they did, because again, I wouldn't be here. My children wouldn't be in the positions that they're in if it wasn't for them.
And I'm sure you've told them how much you appreciate them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what the book's about. I mean, it doesn't necessarily say it like in ink. I mean, I think that's what that's what I say in the foreword, or not the foreword, I'm sorry, in the dedication, that I wouldn't be here without them. But that's really what it's about. It's,
let's be honest. How many pages is that?
270.
Yeah, so it's a 270 page thank you card. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
That's cool, man. That is so cool. I'm so excited for you. So you graduate DePaul.
Mm-hmm.
Then where do you go?
Then I start my career as an attorney.
Okay.
I started at a firm called, at the time, Egan and Trapp. I was doing both, kind of more of a general litigation position plus a personal injury litigation position, because the partners, one was more general practice, one was a personal injury attorney. I stayed there for 2 years. I did some defense work after that, defending doctors and lawyers involved in malpractice litigation. And then after that, I moved on to another plaintiff's firm. And I mean, that was my residency. That was my, my fellowship. That is where I learned to love the law. I feel like the years before that, I was almost acting like I was an attorney. Yeah. It was almost, I say this maybe in the book, it was almost like a pickup line at a bar, as opposed to me actually being an attorney. And then I got with Nick Fakeless and Jeff Tallis, and they taught me how to be an attorney. And I'm grateful for that.
Well, you're building a foundation, right? So you're learning the ins and outs, and you're kind of, to an extent, the first couple of years, you're kind of learning what you like.
Yeah.
Right. And you were on the defendant side, you were on the plaintiff side, and then you decide, well, I'm doing this because this is what I like to do. Now, real quick, for people that are listening to the podcast that are not familiar with what a plaintiff's attorney is, talk about that for just a second. So
sure.
You went to a firm that represents plaintiffs, and it's in personal injury, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So explain what that is, real quick.
Sure. So I represent plaintiffs, or and I currently do too, but I represent people who've been injured, not due to the fault of another person.
Right.
All right.
Or in a car accident, somebody hit them, whatever. Right.
The easiest way is you're sitting at, the one that everyone can appreciate is that you're sitting at a stoplight and someone rear ends you.
Right.
Right. And you're injured because of that.
So you're representing the driver of that car that was rear-ended. That's your
correct.
Point. Right.
Yeah. The individual. And then the people I go up against, represent the people who, caused the collision, or, caused that acute event.
Yeah. So you're typically dealing with insurance companies that insure that driver.
99% of the time. Correct. Yes.
So a plaintiff is somebody who brings the suit.
Correct. We
Defendant
bring
is
the
one
lawsuit.
that answers the suit that the plaintiff brought.
Correct.
Yeah. Just for people that aren't sure. Right.
No,
we're in 27 countries now and growing. We added 3 countries last week.
Oh, really? Which ones?
Last week. I don't know exactly. They're
okay.
Well, actually, I do know one of them. One of them was the Russian Federation.
Oh, really? Awesome.
We added a couple of weeks ago, I got fan mail from Yemen, of all places.
Really?
So there are military personnel, U.S. military personnel in Yemen. I didn't know that. And they're literally locked to the base. So when they're on liberty or whatever, they have, they're listening to our podcast.
Wow, that is excellent. Wow, that this podcast goes all the way out there, and your influence Regis thing.
So the number one by far is the United States that listens to our podcast. Number two is Bangladesh.
Huh.
And that's just happened in the last like 4 weeks. So in the last 4 weeks, Bangladesh has come up to number two. There's somebody there that really likes us. Belgium was number two for the longest time. Now it's number three.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's amazing, to think that there's 27 different countries that are listening to us. It's just, and we're growing. I mean, it's growing. Like, so week before last, we had in a little over 72 hours, we had over 200 requests to be on our podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
In like 72 hours, just over 72 hours. I mean, it was like, it was crazy. And so I'm still trying to dig out, by the way. So anybody that, we hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.